right. Good afternoon to you all. And happy Tuesday. Remember to not misbehave with your microphones, and then I will call on you when I see your names in the chat. The Secretary General spoke at this morning's annual memorial service to honor UN personnel who lost their lives in the line of duty. The event was held virtually this year, unfortunately. That so many of our colleagues choose to serve where risk prevails is a testament to their unstinting commitment to helping the world's most vulnerable people who rely on us for peace, shelter, food, vaccinations, and so much more, the Secretary General said. He paid tribute to the 77 UN personnel who lost their lives in the line of duty between March 16th and December 31st of 2019. 38 were military, which underscores the increasingly complex and dangerous work our peacekeepers are asked to perform every day. The Secretary General added that while three were police and 36 were civilians. They came from 41 countries. He added that this year, when the world is facing the unprecedented upheaval of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're also commemorating 75 years of the United Nations. All around the world, especially in the most fragile context, the blue flag of the United Nations symbolizes hope, and hope is part of the legacy of the colleagues we mourn today. The Secretary General stressed that even one death is too many, pledging to continue to ensure that the UN consistently reviews and improves our practices related to the safety and care of our staff. The Secretary General also spoke today at the virtual high-level meeting on trends, options, and strategies in poverty eradication across the world. The event was organized by the President of the General Assembly. He added that after many years of progress, poverty and hunger are on the rise because of COVID-19, which is reversing decades of progress and elevating levels of inequality within and between countries. The impacts are falling disproportionately on the most vulnerable, the working poor, women, children, persons with disabilities, and other marginalized groups. The Secretary General stressed that we cannot go back to the way things were, and that we have an opportunity to create people-centered economic recovery with decent jobs for all, enabling people to work their way out of poverty. He added that this can only happen if we make the connection between the health and healthcare needs, social and economic environmental well-being. The Secretary General also sent pre-recorded video messages to two important conferences held today. First, the Secretary General delivered a message to the Brussels IV conference on support to the Syrian people. In it, he said that after nearly a decade of war and economic hardship, the scale of suffering remains shocking. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. Over half of the pre-war population of the country is displaced, and 9 out of 10 people are now living in poverty. This year, the Secretary General urged governments not only to renew, but to step up financial, humanitarian, and political commitment to the Syrian people and to countries that are hosting refugees. Looking forward, he said, only a political solution can end the suffering in Syria. The UN-supported political process to achieve sustainable peace is moving slowly. The Secretary General urged all those with influence to help Syrians find common ground. Mark Lowcock, the Emergency Relief Coordinator, also delivered remarks at the conference. He warned that we are seeing food insecurity rise to unprecedented level, with the World Food Programme estimating that 9.3 million people in Syria are now food insecure. He reminded the participants of the conference that the UN Humanitarian Response Plan and COVID-19 plan for Inside Syria requires $3.8 billion for 2020 to assist nearly 10 million people across the country. Geir Pedersen, the Special Envoy for Syria, also spoke. In his remarks, he reiterated the call for a nationwide ceasefire, heeding the Secretary General's global appeal, the need to be vigilant about COVID-19 and Resolution 2254. He also reiterated his appeal for the Syrian government and all other Syrian parties to carry out large-scale unilateral releases of detainees and abductees and meaningful actions for the missing persons. The Secretary General also addressed today's G5 Sahel summit in Mauritania by pre-recorded video message. He said in his message that the pandemic can now be added to the risks faced by the region and linked to climate change, economic insecurity, and the continued deterioration of the security situation. Attacks against civilians are increasing, he said, adding that we are witnessing the emergence of ethnic divides as well as a worsening of inter-community violence, sometimes with involvement of members of national forces. The Secretary General said it is encouraging to see the G5 Sahel fully mobilized to respond to these challenges. He also called for strict respect of international humanitarian and human rights law in the conduct of military operations and provide all possible support to populations under attack by terrorists and radical groups. The Secretary General welcomed the launch of the Sahel Coalition and the Partnership for Security and Stability. These, he said, are two initiatives that we have the potential to facilitate collaboration between all regional and international actors. The international community must mobilize for the long term, adding that countries of the region need support for their security, development, human rights efforts. This message has been shared with you, and it's on our website. For her part this morning, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, spoke at the Ministerial Roundtable on the impact of COVID-19 on Africa's energy sector. She stressed that as we strive to ease the impacts of COVID-19 crisis, we must also plan how to recover better. Ms. Mohammed noted that the foreign direct investment flows into African countries are projected to decline between 25 and 40% in 2020 alone. Our common task for eradicating poverty and achieving the 2030 agenda has never been more urgent, she said, stressing the need for access to clean, affordable, modern energy services. The Deputy Secretary General also called on leaders to shape a climate-positive recovery through green jobs, ending fossil fuel subsidies, and pursuing just and fair transition, amongst other means. As you no doubt saw, at the Security Council today, Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, briefed members on the Secretary General's 9th report on the implementation of Resolution 2231. She told members that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is a significant achievement of multilateral diplomacy and dialogue, which remains crucial to the global nuclear non-proliferation architecture and to regional and international security. She said that we regret the U.S. withdrawal from the plan, adding that we also regret the steps that Iran has taken in response to the U.S. withdrawal and appealed to Iran to return for full implementation of the plan. She said that notwithstanding the current challenges to the JCPOA, it remains the best way to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. And in a statement we issued last night, the Secretary General strongly condemned the terrorist attacks on the stock exchange in Karachi, Pakistan. He conveyed his deep condolences to the families of the victims and the people and government of Pakistan. He reiterated the solidarity of the UN with the country in its efforts to address terrorism and violent extremism. And the UN's peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic reports that a peacekeeper was injured yesterday in exchange of fire with suspected combatants from the armed groups known as 3R. This took place in the Ouaham Pende prefecture. The peacekeepers repelled the attack, which resulted in an unconfirmed number of 3R casualties. They also confiscated weapons, ammunition, vehicles from the attackers. Peacekeepers established a defensive position in a neighboring area amid sporadic firing from multiple directions. You'll recall that 2 weeks ago, the peacekeeping mission and the Central African Armed Forces began an operation in the air to remove 3R combatants, protect civilians, and restore state authority. The UN mission in the country continues to work closely with guarantors, the African Union, and the Economic Community of Central African States, as well as the government, to bring the 3R back to the peace agreement. And turning to COVID, the UN at the Human Rights Council today, Michelle Bachelet, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, presented a global overview of her concerns linked to COVID-19. She said the pandemic threatens both peace and development and calls for leadership grounded in clarity, evidence, and principles to protect the most vulnerable members of society. COVID-19 is like a heat-seeking device that exposes and is fueled by systemic failures to uphold human rights, she added. Human rights are critical to the recovery, and at this crucial time, she called for steady, predictable resources and firm political will. And an update from the country level on our efforts to fight the pandemic. In Brazil, the UN team there is working with authorities at the national and local level with a special focus on protection of migrants, refugees, indigenous peoples, and people in prisons. According to the World Bank, 7 million Brazilians could be pushed into poverty this year if the emergency cash transfer mechanism adopted by the government does not reach the most vulnerable people or is prematurely suspended. The Pan American Health Organization has developed a series of tools and guidelines to support national and local health authorities with an epidemic calculator in partnership with the universities and top national research institutions. And on the border with Paraguay and Argentina, the UN Migration Agency carried out an initiative financed by the European Union, donating infrared thermometers and over 2,000 masks to reinforce the protection of public agents working at the border. For their part, UN Women provided technical support to launch a local campaign in northern states on domestic violence during the pandemic, and UNESCO launched a data initiative for the vulnerable and informal dwellings known as favelas, which reveals that Afro-Brazilians face unequal access to the job market and to education. The survey also said that 9 out of 10 Brazilians recognize that Afro-Brazilians are more likely to be violently approached by the police. And today, the UN Population Fund, or UNFPA, released the State of the World Population 2020. According to the report, every year, millions of girls are subjected to practices that harm them physically and emotionally with the full knowledge and consent of their families, friends, and communities. The report highlights at least 19 practices ranging from breast ironing to virginity testing, which are considered human rights violations. It shows that this year alone, an estimated 4.1 million girls will be subject to female genital mutilation. 1 in 5 marriages today involves a child bride. The report also notes that extreme preference for sons over daughters in some countries have also fueled gender-biased sex selection and extreme neglect, leading to child death, resulting in 140 million, quote, missing females. UNFPA warns that while progress has been made in ending some of the harmful practices worldwide, the COVID-19 pandemic threatens to reverse gains. A recent analysis revealed that if services and programs remain shuttered for 6 months, an additional 13 million girls may be forced into marriage and 2 million girls may be subject to female genital mutilation between now and 2030. And as my guest said yesterday, and that was Melissa Fleming, the Undersecretary General for Global Communications, as she mentioned during yesterday's briefing, today the UN launched a global campaign called Pause to stop the spread of harmful misinformation on COVID-19. The campaign aims to encourage behavioral change, challenging people to break the habit of sharing misleading, shocking, or emotive content without pausing the question of accuracy. The Secretary General, in a tweet today, said that misinformation can circulate faster than facts, endangering public health and people's lives, and encouraged everyone to pause and use the hashtag #TakeCareBeforeYouShare. And I received questions regarding the situation in Guatemala. I can tell you that we trust that Guatemalan authorities will guarantee and safeguard the independence of the judiciary in accordance with international human rights law and standards. It is vital to ensure that judges can perform their functions without any restrictions. We call on Guatemalan authorities to protect the rights and ensure the safety and security of justice operators and human rights defenders who work to support the rule of law in Guatemala. And on this June 30th, we mark 2 international days. In a message on the International Day of Parliamentarism, the Secretary General said the day is a timely occasion to honor the pivotal role of parliaments in giving people a voice and influence to shape policy. He underscored that parliaments have a special duty to advance human rights and promote sustainable developments. More than ever, the pandemic reminds us of these vital tasks. And today is also International Asteroid Day, which aims to raise public awareness about the asteroid impact hazard. It also aims to inform the public about the crisis communication actions to be taken at a global level in case of a credible near-Earth object threat. And to end on some good news, Mali has paid its regular budget dues in full. Thanks to our friends in Bamako, we have now reached 101 of fully paid up member states. All right. Let's see.
And substantively
To say,
in this process.
bear with me 2 seconds.
The preservation and full implementation of the JCPOA also.
All right. Let's go to the chat. All right. James Bays has a few questions.
I do.
James,
I do. Let's start with protests in Africa, which look rather worrying. Given protests in Sudan, any comment on that? And also a prominent activist and protest singer killed in Ethiopia, protests there as well. Any reaction to those two, please?
Look, I don't have any specific language on those protests, but what I can tell you, wherever protests occur, it is important that people's fundamental rights to peaceful assembly, to peaceful protest be upheld, and that security forces, wherever, use restraint and guarantee people's rights to peaceful protest.
I have something on Libya in a moment, but quickly, on yesterday I asked you about Palais Wilson. Any consideration of the naming of Palais Wilson?
No updates on that for now.
Isn't there a worry on that, given public mood, the UN may be behind the curve on this?
I understand, but as soon as I have something to share with you on that, I will.
Okay, with regard to Libya, a quick check that there's no update on the SRSG.
No, you will probably know before I do, given your contacts with Security Council members.
And then I'm moving on to the previous SRSG, Ghassan Salameh, who has given an interview in a podcast. He sounds pretty angry, talking about his time in the job, talking about the Berlin conference, and immediately afterwards seeing that members who attended it, including members of the Security Council, were not complying with what was agreed. And he said, I told the Security Council, many of you are lying to me. He talks about a international system that's deregulated when it comes to the use of force. And he talks about the day that him and the Secretary General were in Libya when General Haftar made his move on Tripoli, saying that he felt at the time he was being stabbed in the back by members of the Security Council. As I've just said, the Secretary General was with him. Does he share many of these thoughts from his former special representative?
In perhaps less colorful language, the Secretary General has also shared his frustration at the fact that there was a conference in Berlin, things were agreed upon, and very little was implemented, and things got worse, and more weapons, and more mercenaries, and more military toys, deadly toys, I must add, poured into the country. So, Mr. Salameh is free to say what he wants, and he uses, as I can understand, his frustration, very direct language. But frankly, the Secretary General's own position, as he's expressed publicly, is not that far off, using more muted language, of course, as he would do. Okay? Iftikhar.
Thank you, Steph. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. The Pakistan Prime Minister has said that he has approached Secretary General, the UN Secretary General, about India's issuance of 25,000 domicile certificates to Indian nationals in Indian-occupied Kashmir, something like settlers in the occupied Palestinian territories, in violation of United Nations resolutions and international law, saying it was an attempt to change the democratic character of the Muslim majority state. Do you have any comments on this?
I'm not aware of direct contact. I can check, but I've not seen any direct contact from the Prime Minister to the Secretary General. But that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But I will check.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Abdel,
yes.
Hamid, please.
Thank you. The government of national accord in Libya said recently that the Wagner mercenaries are coming in mass to protect the oil crescent near Syria. And they are calling on the international community and calling on the Europeans also to do something about the expansion of the Wagner mercenary presence in that region. So do you have any information to share with us? Any feedback?
No specific information that I can tell you but obviously that we have been calling for a return to a political dialogue. And in fact, I should have said this to you also in my earlier answer, that the acting special representative, Stephanie Williams, met 3 days ago on the 27th of June in Rome with the president of the Presidency Council of the government, Fayez Sarraj. She met with him in Rome. She briefed him about the ongoing efforts to advance discussions on the three tracks: the security track, the political track, the economic track, and the intra-Libyan dialogue. They had also in their discussion talked about the UN support to Libyan authorities, pertaining especially to demining, and also supporting the investigations into the mass graves that we've been talking about. She also called for the immediate halt of oil blockade, which has already cost the country billions of dollars in lost revenues from sales that they should rightly been able to make. Anybody else? All right, go back to the Security Council.
I have a question, Stéphane. Can you hear me?
Yes, who's this?
Yoshita.
Oh, Yoshita, I don't see you, but I can hear you now. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So yesterday, the U.S. Secretary of State, he voiced concern over China's use of forced sterilization, abortion, and coercive family planning measures against the Uyghurs and other minorities in the Xinjiang region, and saying that this is part of a continued campaign of repression. Does the SG have a comment to that, given that the U.S. said that this demonstrates an utter disregard to the sanctity of human life and basic human dignity? Any comment from the SG?
We don't have any direct access to the reports. We've seen the media reports. I think the Secretary General's position on the human rights issue and his concern for that in the northwest of China has been stated repeatedly and is unchanged. Okay, thank you all, and see you tomorrow. Bye.